Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
Dustin Ray.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we're going to discuss profiles for de-risking releases. Dustin, why don't you kick us off? What are some of the profiles to go about thinking about de-risking releases?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this the other day, and there's really different perspectives to look at. Like, right, risk is a very ambiguous word, and I think everybody talks about risk. It's not really a buzzword, but everybody's thinking about it, right? Whether you are here's the three personas, right? If you're a software engineer, you may be thinking about risk from different perspectives. If you're like a project manager or even like a product owner, I think even those have some nuances in them. You may be doing certain de-risking there. Or if you're more like an executive, like a stakeholder or the owner in a company, you may have kind of a longer strategic vision. And there's certain risk factors that I'd love to talk about, I think, that are really important from even the really high level strategy perspective to watch out for as you kind of go through the operations. You know, when you're executing your vision from vision to the operations level, executing all of those different risk profiles and making sure everybody's on the same page from an expectation standpoint. So I think that's how it started out.
Oh, this is good because this is an argument I have with a product group repeatedly where I say, hey, we should do lots of little incremental releases because that is very low risk from a software perspective. And they come back and they say, no. We can't give incremental releases to the customer. That's very risky because they might, get stuck on one of these incremental releases and wonder what the heck we're doing. And we need to have this giant functionality release because it doesn't make sense incrementally.
Hmm.
And I definitely feel tension between the two of, well, okay, if we do a giant release, that's a lot of risky software.
Right.
And their feeling is if we don't do a giant release, it's risky product.
I would counter argument because I've seen cases where even from the product side, I've seen product cases where you try to roll out something completely brand new to a user, especially in software where you're talking about like business software, right? So you're talking about somebody that these people that are doing their jobs day to day, they've been doing it a certain way for X months, years, whatever, right? So if you kind of out of the blue completely change the paradigm of their work, if it's not immediately intuitive, like more intuitive than the last piece of software, you actually get pushback from at least a large portion of the population of your product anyway, because not everybody is like an early adopter, kind of mentality where they want to use, new software, even if it has 10% better performance in XYZ. Sometimes those benefits are actually at the business level. So the user may not even see benefits of using, changing the software or using the new feature. It may be like a customer level feature to begin with anyway. So I think there's, a lot of evidence to suggest the de-risking there from the product perspective is to have like, beta groups or I've seen really good success with tools that let you do something similar to like Figma's prototyping, where you can walk a user through a guided kind of mock prototype, and they can tell you their feedback. They can tell you their frustrations. What felt intuitive? Would they recommend it, to somebody, or would they be upset if it was taken away from them? Like, would it affect their workflow? Asking those kinds of questions, I think, can gauge, true sentiment towards those product changes. So I think that argument in of itself is, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that there's better workflows for de-risking that, but they are more expensive and they take more time. So there's, again, from the founder's perspective or even the board's perspective or the financial perspective, there's risk in that taking those jumps to begin with. So everything is just a balance of risk and reward at the end of the day.
That's an interesting, the point you added at the end where from the founder or from like the leadership's perspective, time is risky, right? The longer
Right.
anything takes, the more risky it is. From developer standpoint, large is risky.
Mhm.
Right.
And from the product standpoint, I guess we're saying change is risky.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting, so we're saying, from development, it's size, from product, it's change, and from leadership, it's time and how you would, I guess, move along those three axes of
Yeah, it sounds a
time.
lot
So
like the iron triangle of project management, right? Between like quality and scope and budget, right? It's kind of a similar mindset. You're kind of balancing what do you need in the moment out of those, you know, perspectives.
well, I'm not sure that we are because in my head, if you made smaller changes or if you made smaller code changes, that makes code less risky, and you're making smaller product changes, so that would make product less risky, and you're doing it
Mm-hmm.
faster, so that makes less time, so that's less time risk, which goes back to lots and lots of incremental change is the less risky option for all three groups.
Yeah, I guess that. Yeah, if you're looking at like size, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
a size of a change. Yeah, I think if we're looking at what is the best way to kind of de-risk a change, I think size is definitely what you'd want to be looking at. Yeah, lowest time, most accurate, easiest to test. I think all of those types of things would come into play.
So that kind of runs counter, I think, to Jeffrey, what you'd originally mentioned about like the small releases, it not being good for products, like products wanting the full feature out for the customer because the incremental releases didn't really
Well,
jive with them as much.
yeah, I said I argue with them about it because I think they're wrong.
Uh, gotcha.
So Dustin agrees with my point of view, and he
Yeah.
also feels that this straw man of a product person is wrong.
Hmm.
And there's nothing like knocking over a straw man to make yourself feel correct.
Yeah, yeah. I
Right.
will say there is a even to play devil's advocate. There's I think a class or a culture of the best way to test anything is to see if people will pay for it. And in order to have, you gotta have to have something for people to pay for.
Hmm.
What you actually build and sell in that moment to validate that, I think, is a different story. And we've seen people do different things over time for that. But I think there is a group of people that think just running fast, trying it out, seeing if people will pay, may feel like the least risky from a total investment standpoint. I had an investment group one time tell me that they wanted to build POCs, kind of like production grade almost POCs, but from the standpoint of not technical POCs, but from the standpoint of product. And they wanted to see could they get past a certain revenue line in say 90 days with this model that they had, and if they couldn't, then it wouldn't work for them. But they would only invest a certain amount in the technology leading up to that, or in the research, or like any part of it. So they had kind of a budget per idea strategy, and it did not. It was very lean, I would say. So you would not be executing strong, tests and practices through that. So I think there's a class of a strategy there as well.
And how did that work out? Do you know how that worked out for them?
I don't. I don't. I mean, we don't do that type of work, so it wasn't a fit for us. But it was a client
Fair
we were
enough.
talking to because they had,
I do think
several
that
apps they wanted to build.
I think that methodology can work. I think it just depends on like what part of the startup phase that you're in or how much money you have to burn. Like you were talking about from an investment standpoint, it kind of makes sense to do the lean strategy because you want to invest the least amount of money into something that might flop. So
Right.
I've definitely done that at a company before where we were trying to we had one product that we just sunk a ton of resources in, like 8 months of resources in,
Oh,
and they canceled it. And then we had layoffs because that
Wow.
we were sinking a lot of money into that being our next big thing. So the next time we tried to approach a new idea, we built this really small, tiny version of it just to see if people liked it, because we didn't want to have that same issue happen again. And that ended up working out for us. People liked that product. Then we had to go back through and do the thesis shipping kind of iterative improvements as it got bigger and bigger. But it was a nice way to gauge it when we're going, oh, okay, the money in the bank is running a bit low. Let's just see if people actually care about this thing first. And I think
Right.
that's a really important distinction to make because sometimes if the developers don't have that mindset, all they can see is, oh, we're being forced to write really terrible code with zero tests very quickly. This company sucks. And that's not the intent. It's just a strategy right now is this is low budget. Let's see if people care. Then we'll do it the right way. But some people, it just doesn't shake with them very well.
right. Well, it's a phase, and you have to be
Yeah.
clear to yourself and to the programmers. Like, this is a phase because we're throwing it out there and it may not work. And if it's not going to work, then whatever. And if it does work, then we're going to invest in it. And if you go in with that mindset of, hey, we're going to try 10 ideas and 7 or 8 of them are going to get canceled, and that's totally fine. The part where people
There's a
trip
meme
up
in
is
there.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was saying the part where people get tripped up is not the we're going to try 10 ideas and we're going to cancel 8 of them. It's and then we have to go back and productize the 2 that survive.
Right.
I think that's where people fall apart. And they're like, oh, it's great. We're good. We're making money. Therefore, this is right. It's like, well, no. This is like a Hollywood set. There's buildings on one side.
Yeah. You have to make all of it work. But I think there's that front loading, right? So you're spending, the trade-off is, do I spend all this time up front to make it right for no one to use it and for it to be a complete waste? Mm-hmm. Or from the CEO or CTO or whatever perspective of spend as little as possible to gauge viability and cancel it. That way I can still pay my employees. And it's that part there is like money is a real problem for some companies. Right. So not taking it personally is something I had to kind of learn 5 companies ago. I was just kind of thinking, why in the world would they put me on this dumpster fire and not let me improve it? And like, I can't write good code. They're intentionally telling me not to write good code. And that's the point, because you're just trying to write fast code that's not tested to gauge it. And then you have to go, oh, I guess I just need to be okay with iterative delivery and maybe refactoring or restructuring how this code is going to behave now that 50 customers signed up and they're paying for it now. But that money then is way more important than just kind of like, trying to polish something that never sees the light of day.
Exactly.
Right. And skipping tests is not the same as writing bad code. That's a thing that I think a lot of developers also struggle with. It's like, oh, well, this is going to be fast code, therefore I'm going to write it shitty. It's like, whoa. It's no more effort to write like code that is, single responsibility and dry and all of that. Even if you don't write the tests, you can still write, good code, and you could write tests and write, giant 1,000-line procedural functions. And that's a choice. I was
more or less just summarizing, just writing code as fast as you can and not being concerned about quality. Just summarizing it as bad code. But I agree with you that you can deliver good code without test or with test.
Yeah.
Any other risk profile?
Go ahead. I was gonna say there's other risks that I have seen as well. So like so for example, this is kind of a counterintuitive one. But for example, if you are say you're an existing company and you have a good size audience, you have a good intuition on kind of this next product that you're going to build, the risk profile becomes less about how do I conserve money in case of failure and more about where do I need to invest to ensure that rapid success can happen, right? So I'll give you a few examples of these. Events spaces, so like events booking, concerts, festivals, like these kinds of events. We've done booking software for these where the infrastructure has to be very kind of burstable up for a certain event. And then if we were to stay and maintain that level, it'd be extremely expensive for the downtime. So we kind of burst back down. But there's then, a concept of e-commerce is another example where you have kind of like these drops, right? Or auctions or something like that, where the risk is really, can you, how much do you need to provision and invest ahead of time to be able to take what's coming in without potentially overspending past what your profit margin is going to be leading up to it, whether that be engineering resources, hosting resources, recovery, there's a lot of fallout that can happen as well. I've seen from businesses where if they don't plan for that properly, there's like brand fallout, whether that's partnerships, different things like that. So I think there's, risk profile also in like almost being too successful. So, how would you think about that from both like the engineering perspective and, the management perspective?
Like the too successful one, like you blow up overnight, then suddenly people start trying to hack you because everyone
Well,
knows
yeah,
your
it's not
name.
even like necessarily that you know, it's not even like it comes out of nowhere, right? Like it may be like, okay, we're talking to XYZ, you know, people in the space, you know, one brand deal hits, you know, okay, we're going to try to prepare for it, right? And so like see it from a non-technical founder's perspective. If you've been in this iterative phase and you're just kind of trying to get traction, you
Mhm.
finally get that brand deal that's going to, you know, land, and then yeah, exactly, like maybe scale hits, you weren't prepared for the level of scale, you didn't realize that, you know, coupon codes were infinitely redeemable, you know, and you know, the card's down to zero and people have checked everything out and it's hacked, it's online, right? Like, what do you,
Yeah.
you know, that now that's an operational nightmare. You may not have the resources internally to like manage it. So you're up with your team 24/7 trying to like deal with those things. So I think there's like a, you know, it can go like good and bad,
Right.
even when you are
Mm-hmm.
successful. So it's like, how do you kind of, you know, if you kind of see that incoming, how do you kind of prepare yourself for the storm?
I think what you're saying is the where your software your success manages to outrun your software's scalability, right? Especially if you've got the do the 10 ideas quick, and if one of those two that is successful actually goes viral and becomes a real big thing, now you're in trouble because you intentionally only put up the facades and you didn't build it out,
Right.
Right.
right? And
So
now
like
you're
Fire Festival would be like an extreme case, I think, of this, right?
Right.
But like I say that to say that I think we all laugh because you can think of software that you've probably seen or heard of that was essentially the Fire Festival
For sure.
version of that in the tech world. So like, you know, it does happen. Um, you know, and it looks foolish, it looks amateur, right? So it's you know, something you would want to protect yourself from the best that you can. And it's something I've seen, you know, especially non-technical founders kind of experience, and they're aware of it from a business perspective. But it's like how do you know your team knows what to do in that situation, right? So like if it was me, I'd be looking for do we kind of understand roughly the traffic profile that's coming in, right? So one way you may do that is if you have partnership deals. This is what I've seen in the e-commerce space. You can get a rough idea of kind of their audience size, and you can kind of gauge through like click-through rates and percentages, just even off industry standards, what your traffic may be. And you can kind of estimate, you know, over guesstimate that from the engineering perspective to kind of
Mhm.
understand, you know, at least the technical resources needed. Now, if you're a non-technical founder, how do you know that? I think it's just about partnering. You know, hopefully at that phase, and you know, you're hitting something that you're kind of partnering with the correct people. Um, you know, obviously, from my perspective, I think everybody would agree. You know, if you're operating from that very iterative approach, one motto I always say is if something is not like fully tested, you can just imagine that it's broken from a product perspective. And so the same thing. If you guys haven't spent time actually being sure that you're going to be able to scale from the business owner's perspective, I would assume that you cannot, right?
I really like that. If you haven't fully tested something, assume it doesn't work.
It's a good rule of thumb.
Right. Yeah. And it applies to everything, right? Even scaling, security. So like if a founder were to come to me and say, hey, well, what's our security posture? I would ask, well, how much time have you invested in security? If the answer is we've only done product features since I've worked here, I'm guessing it's not probably not very good, right? I mean, unless you have somebody specifically doing it, you know, I would assume it's not very good because that's not what's being incentivized, right? Speed of delivery of features is probably being incentivized, so developers
Right.
are relying heavily on that, just like we said. They're with best intentions writing good code, may not have all the tests covered. They may not be covering security measures fully, right? Especially in the early days. So just
Mm-hmm.
being aware of those risks, I think, are important.
All right.
Excellent. Any more points we should make, or should we wrap it up?
I think we're good for now.
All
Yeah,
right.
that's
Well,
it on my
thank you
side.
all for listening. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
Dustin Ray.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.